Stay hungry, stay foolish.
So now in the Innovation Show, we welcome Chief Information Officer for Naughty America, Ian Paul. Welcome to the show, Ian.
Hey, thank you so much, Aidan.
It's great to have you on the show. Your industry's seen the exact same challenges as many other industries. Anybody in digital business, any kind of entertainment, news, video, all that's been totally disrupted. But before we go into that, Ian, it'd be great to understand your background.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had a relationship with the owners of this company back during the dot-com boom. I was a senior systems administrator, moonlighting, doing some consulting work with some clients that I'd found. And they were one of many clients that I consulted with and, did performance tuning and security work for the website in the early days. And they went their merry way, and so did I. I ended up jumping out and going to B school and getting an MBA, and then hopping over to IBM and acting in some product manager roles and some sales executive roles ultimately. And I received a phone call from the owners of the company indicating that they were interested in hiring me back, and they had me come down to the office. And I was blown away. I didn't realize how much they grew in such a short period of time. And it was obvious to me they certainly did need a CIO, and we came to an agreement, and that's how I ended up on board.
I read a great article you did, and you were talking about the challenges in the industry and how it's been totally disrupted by tube sites, etc. And it got me thinking that it's very, very similar to what's happened with news and video and Blockbuster and Netflix. And could you talk us through the kind of history of the industry?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, everyone's familiar with the days of buying DVDs in the bookstore. Maybe you might have bought them online early on. The internet itself certainly disrupted all of that. There wasn't really a lot to do on the internet in the late 90s, if you all recall, or those that remember. You could look up stock quotes, go to Amazon and buy some books, have some conversations with some people. So, it was obvious to most that pornography was a huge opportunity. And a few companies sought out that opportunity and innovated and developed things like digital transaction processing. Just payment processing itself was largely pushed by adults, and as well as video streaming. And so Naughty America was born during that time. And it really excelled at pushing the limit of the kind of quality and the size of the videos that could be delivered. And when it did that, it was able to capture an enormous amount of traffic because people were interested in that. They were getting better internet connections. They were getting the DSL or the cable internet, and they were hungry for a higher quality product. And so Naughty America delivered that, captured a lot of market share, developed the brand. And that worked out well for many years. There was a huge rise in the business until around, let's say, 2007 or 8, when a group of folks released several different tube sites and pirated content that was out there and put it for free on these tube sites and made money off of advertisements and basically acquired the traffic. I mean, why would you go to any sort of pay site when you can just go to a tube site and see that content for free? And by acquiring the traffic, they could then monetize off of advertisements and even directing the traffic back to their own paid sites. That gave them an enormous infusion of cash to go consolidate smaller players in the industry and either keep them operating as a pay site or just taking the content and rolling it into the tube site. And that was very, very destructive for the industry, for studios that were producing the content themselves. That was very destructive during that time. And I'm sure if you search around the internet, you can find some remnants of discussions and debates about that time in the adult and entertainment industry's history on the internet.
We saw that happen in news industry, for example, where many other sites, they became kind of an Amazon kind of aggregator for the news. And in a way, in the entertainment industry, in the early days of the social networks and Facebook, people built their traffic on Facebook to direct it back to their own owned properties. And that's the way I see the parallel to the adult industry with the tube sites, because the tube sites built the relationship with the audience. And as you said, it was free. So why would you ever go through a paywall or a subscription?
I think it's a valid parallel. And I think if we looked at other industries and what's possible with internet technology and how it can be used to acquire traffic in legitimate and illegitimate ways, I think the parallel is the perfect one.
Because there's another one, Ian, you mentioned about the late 90s. So the adult industry were leaders in video, in streaming video, in, as you said, payment systems. There was so much innovation happening there from a very, very early stage. And they drove a lot of that innovation, even before Vimeo, before YouTube, before all the mainstream tube sites, essentially. Before streaming became ultra mainstream, it was driven by the adult industry.
That's absolutely true. I think during that time, you didn't have as many large internet companies with big R&D budgets. Now, of course, you have folks like Google and Facebook, and you had Google during that time, but it just wasn't as big. Today, they have huge R&D budgets that completely dwarf the adult entertainment industry. And so we've moved from being a forefront innovator to almost I want to say not an early adopter, but an early adapter of something that's come out of a mainstream R&D, a research and development department. And we're sitting there trying to bring it to the market and saying, okay, well, this is how you made it. Here's how you can make money off of it. So we're adapting a lot of these products and taking advantage of these large R&D departments that the mainstream companies have.
That's the other problem for entertainment industry and news industries. All of a sudden, you've been a content company and the world's become technologically advanced, or digital technology companies have become content companies. And that is the best way to be in this world, is when you're led by technology, led by data, led by personalization. And that's where the real struggle we see in the industry.
Yeah, because once you're a digital content company, your content can be pirated or copied or what have you, and it can really damage you. And you can get into a discussion of intellectual property rights, but today the tube sites operate a little bit more legitimately, but they hide behind laws like the DMCA. So, for instance, we'll find a video of ours and we'll inform them that they have one of our videos, but you know what? The law provides them a certain amount of time to comply with our takedown request. And so that video gets to sit up there for that entire time. And when they pull it down, guess what? Another mysterious user uploads it again. Even all of these intellectual property laws can be circumvented and played with. So it's protecting IP from that standpoint. Yeah, we do it, but it's certainly not a survival strategy. You have to do it, but it's not going to really advance you. If this was any other industry, you would have government entities cracking down, proposing changes to the law, but no one in any sort of governmental position wants to be the advocate for the adult entertainment industry. It's political suicide. Yeah. So, we're left in the wild, wild west, which is fine. We've figured out strategies to adapt. It's, we're certainly not bitter. It just makes us very focused on the direction we have to go, and that's innovation.
I suppose another challenge you see, and because of how easy it is to become a publisher, anybody who has a blog, anyone who has a camera, and the smartphones become the camera, we've seen a massive rise in user-generated content or bloggers, and that's very equivalent to what's happening in the adult industry as well, where you have people just setting up sites themselves, you have people setting up their own home videos, you have uploading to the tube sites, all that kind of video as well. And while the quality pales in comparison to the work you would do, for example, for some people, it's good enough and a challenge to the industry even further.
Yeah, and I think one of the bigger challenges is regulation. So we operate our company inside of a very heavily regulated framework. So for every scene that we put out, we have a terminal here in the office, and if the FBI comes here, they can sit down at this terminal that we have prepared for them and look up any scene that we filmed, and they can see the copy of the driver's licenses of the performers. They can see the consent release forms. They can see all of this huge paper trail that shows that we're operating legally and everything's above board. When you're dealing in the realm of user generated content, I think you start moving into territory where when people typically object to pornography, that's the kind of stuff they're thinking of this huge unregulated piece of it. And so that becomes a difficulty. On the other hand, certainly it helps fill in consumer preference gaps that we might not be addressing. So we look at that information. We see, hey, what are people producing? What's more on the amateur end of things, and how can we adapt that to our content?
So what you guys have done is really focused on high quality content, high quality actors, much like, say, the Wall Street Journal or Financial Times, specialist sites that really put out top quality content. And you know that if you go to that site, this is the type of quality content you're going to get.
Absolutely, and coupled with innovation. So how do we keep raising the bar? These tube sites set an expectation amongst their users that the content should be free. So how do we differentiate that content, not only in terms of quality, but just in format and innovation? And we can get into the discussion of virtual reality. If we can innovate, then users expect, okay, well, that's so much different. That's so much better. We're going to have to pay for that. And it doesn't seem odd to them to have to pay. Whereas if you give them something they can find anyway on a tube site, the common person is going to say, why should I pay for that?
Yeah, and before we go into that, because I know you've really, really pushed the bar with that and raised the bar. Another parallel I just saw was your strategies for attracting subscribers are very similar to any other world, even down to your choice of actors with high social followings.
It's challenging for us because many websites that you typically advertise on, or even Google, they have restrictions on what we can do. And so we have to be even more creative on how we acquire traffic. For instance, AdWords. You can't use AdWords that link from Google to any sort of adult site. So there's no advertising to people who might even be legitimately searching for this particular actress. We can't place an ad to connect them to the content that we have for that actress because of this discrimination against people who look at adult content. So we have to be very creative about how we kind of breadcrumb content out there on the internet to lead people back to the premium content that we have.
Can you share any of that with us?
I think you'd be more interested in the production aspects of it than actually the strategy itself. So when I describe this strategy to you, you're going to say, okay, that makes sense. That seems simple, but how you pull it all together is the key. The idea is, look, we have a lot of different channels. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, we have Snapchat, we have just sites you might stumble upon on Google. And then in the adult world, we have some legacy sites that have just been around a long time that get traffic. And then you have the tube sites. You have the performers' own Twitter accounts and Twitter itself. You have all of these different things. Now, every day we're releasing new content. We're releasing new scenes. And we need to market those scenes like Hollywood would market a movie. But we need to market it across all of those different channels. So certainly what we had been doing before was, after we get the scene, back from production, we figure out, okay, how do we create little snippets that are appropriate for each channel. So Instagram could have a PG-13 very nice photo. Snapchat might be a takeover by one of the performers. Facebook's really difficult for us to work with, but you can see there's different ways that you would market this scene that's released every day across these different channels. The challenge for us, though, was the delay that was creating, in that you would receive some sort of scene back from production and then have to, after the fact, create all this content. What we did is we shifted the content creation for all of these channels to the actual production environment itself. That means on set, there's a photographer shooting actual content specifically for each channel, rather than us having to kind of crawl through content that's already been shot to try to maybe get something that would work on a particular channel. And by pushing it down to where the content was being created originally and shooting content specific for each channel, even to the extent of doing interviews, with the performers that can become snippets that go here and go there. That's really how you gain some efficiencies. And I think that's where most people get lost, most companies get lost, is it's hard to do it all. And you get just dwarfed by the amount of channels and places that you have to market to. And the more you can create efficiencies by moving that close to where the content was created to begin with, the more successful you're going to be.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I remember in the early days of digital marketing, telling people who were creating TV ads to go, while you're shooting a TV ad, shoot a YouTube version, shoot a 20-second version, shoot a 15-second version in the workflow, rather than having to come back and try and edit it in, because it won't make any sense.
Well, that's absolutely right. And I was reading an article about from the Netflix CEO, and he was talking about how they don't really want to adopt virtual reality. It's a different format. I'm thinking to myself, hey, you're shooting these Netflix originals. Shoot some virtual reality content while you're at it. You're already there. And release it as just supplementary content. It can't do anything but help you. And they finally did that with the Stranger Things original series that they did. There was some VR content that was shot alongside it, and they released that.
Yeah, because it can really act as a breadcrumb and bring people back to the main piece of content that they may pay for, because it can be the link that sells the chain.
No, certainly. We have to be very, very efficient in how we pay for content production, right? If you're spending X amount per scene and you're releasing 2 or 3 scenes a day, you want to make sure that the return on investment is as high as possible. If you're producing things that people aren't consuming, it's not what they want, then you're wasting your money. So I think there's a definite parallel here to the news, the news industry, quite certainly.
Kind of covered all the kind of common problems that we've both had, but then let's talk about your innovation, where you in particular have been driving a VR and 360 strategy.
Yeah, the virtual reality for us was always something we dreamed about. We would joke about it because look, we've been virtual reality's been romance to us since the mid to late 90s, right? It's something that came about and then went away, and it was like, well, what happened to that? That would be so great if we could have virtual reality pornography. And when we tried, I think it was the Oculus Rift demo at some conference we went to. We tried to go to all the conferences just to pay attention to trends and whatnot. And we said, look, this is possible. We could do this. Let's fast track the development. And we essentially bought every piece of equipment we could find to do this, and locked ourselves in a room until we figured out how to make it possible. And not only possible, but how could we do it inexpensively so that we could iterate very, very quickly in looking at that analytic data and feeding that back into the production process and producing better and better and better quality content. And we released our first virtual reality scene actually in July of 2015. And we've been releasing 1 or 2 videos since then. It's been tremendously successful for us. So
have you built that then into the workflow, going back to what you said about, adapting for the platform? And do you still tend to shoot in normal HD and then 4 VR as well? Oh yeah, no, we release content for 2D, for whether it's in the format of a 4K or HD. We have a huge legacy of customers that are watching in 2D, and VR is something that we do as a supplement to that. It's becoming more and more important. But it's like when DVDs came out, VHS didn't just get flushed down the toilet. You have to balance both formats for a while until you can shift over. The shift over to VR is probably going to take a little bit longer because it's so much different. It's not just like increasing the quality from VHS to DVD. It's a whole new way of experiencing
and recording content. So I have a feeling both formats are still going to be popular as we move forward, with virtual reality taking more and more as we innovate as producers in how we shoot the content. Today, our content in 180, we do that to increase the pixel density so that it's very crisp and clear in front of you. And we don't let you look behind you for that reason. You can imagine stretching a cell phone screen all the way behind you. The part that you're looking at wouldn't be very clear. So we're keeping it condensed. It's all point of view. So you're not ever a third person in the room. It's always from your vantage point. But we're going to innovate beyond that. And as we do, we're going to attract more and more customers.
Yeah, and how you mentioned about like you're kind of going to be riding these two horses at the same time, where you have your legacy customers and your upgraders, I suppose, your early adopters to VR. And are you going to introduce like a price point difference there, or how will you do that? Because obviously it takes more investment. Or are you just kind of going, this is our future, we need to innovate, we need to experiment now to save ourselves in the future?
Look, when we came out with our mobile product, we didn't charge people a separate amount to have mobile access. The way we look at it is we have a relationship with you, the customer, and we want to support you in satisfying your desires across any situation in your life. So if you're on the road, you might be using your mobile phone. If everyone's left your house and you want to close the blinds and don the headset, we have you there too. If you just want to use your laptop, you're good. So we want to develop a relationship that's not segmented by device. It's about our relationship with you as a member of our site.
Brilliant. So you're taking an omnipresent approach where you just kind of going, we're just customer first, audience first strategy.
Well, for us, it makes a lot of sense, right? You have these other adult VR startups that have no 2D back catalog, right? So our value proposition to the VR customer is, hey, you want VR? We have that. It's the best. Plus, as a bonus, you get all this really high quality 2D that you might not have tried before. Great. To the 2D customer, our value proposition is, hey, you love 2D. We have the best quality 2D. Plus, you get this bonus. If you ever get one of these devices, you're going to have access to this cool new VR content. So for us, it really makes sense to play both sides.
Ian, it's been great to talk to us. Appreciate you taking the time, and we wish the best of luck.
Thanks so much, and thanks for having me.
Thanks a million. Ian Paul, CIO with Naughty America. So now on the Innovation Show, we welcome James Corbett, CEO and founder of Simvirtua and CEO and founder of 3D Camp. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Aidan.
Good to have you here, man. And I saw a YouTube video of you giving a talk, and it was brilliant. Where was it again? Limerick, was it?
That
one of the universities.
In the Gaeltacht, I think. The one in Galway, perhaps.
That's it, yeah. But I just thought that your explanation of VR and AR and the journey that we've all been on, and it was brilliant. Your background and understanding of this started very, very early with seeing the movie Disclosure.
Yeah, God, yeah, I did. I suppose that was probably the first time, really, Aidan, that I heard the term virtual reality. I mean, I suppose a lot of people in tech are aware of, or would have been interested in the concept prior to that in the likes of Star Trek and the holodeck on Star Trek, which was this room that you used to walk into and you tell the computer to run a program and it could simulate whatever type of environment you wanted to be in. So that was the same concept, but the term virtual reality I mightn't have heard, I guess, until the film Disclosure came out, and I got the book for Disclosure before that, because I remember reading a review in a computer magazine, and it wasn't so much talking about the plot of the movie Disclosure as talking about this amazing concept of virtual reality, and I just had to get that book then. So yeah, I guess it really goes back to then, and I was kind of just fascinated, I think, always by the idea of being able to kind of transport yourself in place and time with digital technology.
Your early foray into VR and the VR world was more of an education one.
It was, yeah. I mean, I suppose I remember we started. Well, I started doing kind of on a voluntary basis just IT support for a local Gael school, and that's in Newcastle West in County Limerick, and I think around 2009 that was, and it was just, there was a really inspiring, I have to say, principle there called Dahlia Muraku, just a really kind of forward thinker in terms of the application of technology to education. And, they had a new school there at the time. They had all the interactive whiteboards and broadband and all laptops, anything you could wish for in a primary school. And yet he wasn't satisfied that they were teaching any better or any differently to what they always did using this technology. So he used to be saying to me, James, is there any better way that we could be applying this technology to just teach kids better? And I suppose I was kind of aware, or I'd been dabbling in to a degree, Second Life for a few years at that stage, and you might remember that one. And it was kind of one of the first virtual worlds, I think from about 2002, so it goes way back. And it always fascinated me, but I was never really fully drawn into it because I remember thinking, like, if we could wear a virtual reality headset and be really in this place, it would just be so much more powerful. But really, Second Life was what you call a virtual world. So it was like an open-ended kind of a sandbox world. And I think people wouldn't understand that better nowadays when they see the likes of Minecraft. And that's the real power of Minecraft, what all the kids are into, is that it's kind of like a digital Lego, and it gives kids the power to create their own digital creations.
Their own world. Yeah, my son's just got into
world.
it. Josh, he's fascinated by it, and just Dad, I built a house and I put a roof in it, and but it's great because it's building, it's creation.
Exactly. So they're not just consuming a game; they're kind of producing their own content. It's much more creative. So that was kind of what we were trying to do, or we saw that we could do perhaps at the school at the time, because there was an open source version of Second Life called Open Simulator. And we were able to bring that into the school, and we let the kids at it for a while, and they did just incredible stuff. They created their own scavenger hunts, learning content, kind of quizzes.
Wow!
So that's what we saw, I guess, the potential of in the school, and the kids kind of confirmed that, and the teachers loved it. And really, we thought, look, this idea is too good to be just here at this school. Let's see if we could maybe take it to other schools. And at that time, myself and a friend went to Social Entrepreneurs Ireland with that idea. And, that's a great organisation based here in Dublin that supports people that have ideas that mightn't necessarily be, suitable for a for-profit business, but at the same time could do potentially a lot of social good. And they supported us to see what we could do with that. And we actually joined forces then at the time with another person who was going through the Social Entrepreneurs Program, Mrs. Margaret Keane. And she was the founder of an organisation called Gifted Kids, a really great organisation to support parents of children which are what they call twice exceptional, in the sense that these kids are very intelligent, but often have a lot of learning difficulties to go along with that. So great organisation, and Margaret understood the potential of gaming, because her own kids made really strong connections online, even though they might have found it difficult to form friendships
in person,
in the school and in person, let's say. And she'd seen that with a lot of these kids, and formed very strong bonds online, playing the likes of EVE Online and gaming, multi-user gaming like that, let's say. So we joined forces with Margaret, and I remember we went to the Department of Education, and in fairness to them, they got it. They really understood what we were trying to do, and they supported us then to run a program in the schools for 1 year, and that was with 20 schools. And I have to say, like, there was a lot of really, incredibly positive things came out of that. I think nearly every one of the teachers, to a person, thought it was a really great way of for the kids to express themselves, to be creative. But interestingly, it was a lot of the kids who would have had other, social difficulties or learning difficulties, that there was some really strong stories came back about, how well it suited their learning.
Yeah, because there's a huge opportunity there, isn't there, in the immersive opportunities to learn, because, you can read as much as you want or be dictated to, but when you're immersed in it, the learning is just totally different dynamic.
Yeah, exactly. I think the kids like gaming. All kids like gaming. I mean, how many kids that don't like some type of gaming or playing games? So there's kind of, what we saw was that there was room for a kid of every aptitude really to express themselves or to participate. So just to give you one example, there was a school in County Offaly, a little 2-teacher school, wonderful little rural school, and they were quite close to Clonmacnoise. So they undertook the project to create a virtual Clonmacnoise, and it was fantastic what they did. But there was room there for kids of every aptitude. Like there was the kids who were kind of mathematically inclined or artistically, there was architecture involved and kind of recreating the monastery. There was, role play. There was, we needed a script writer and a director to kind of direct, if you like, their own Toy Story type of an animated feature based around the Clonmacnoise that they had created. So you kind of name it. And any subject, if you like, that's been taught in primary school, geography, history, as I say, maths, English, they all fit into that scenario that the kids created for themselves.
Yeah, and what year was that?
That was 2011.
Wow, yeah, so you're still ahead of when, became popular again, if you will.
Yeah.
So what was the next step then?
The next step then was, unfortunately, the Department of Education were going through some changes at the time. So the unit of the department that funded that program wasn't around to refund it for a second year, and we kind of learned the hard way that even when the teachers and the kids and the parents love something, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's money in the schools to pay for this stuff. So unfortunately, it didn't seem like there was a way to make it a viable entity, the not-for-profit. And we decided, sadly, to wind down the not-for-profit and to reboot then as a for-profit company, which we call Simvirtua Limited. And the idea is, even though, we've kind of parked, if you like, the education, the primary and secondary education side of things, that all that stuff is sitting on a server somewhere in LIT. And we'd love to find a way to run that as a viable business, but really we've had to look more so towards enterprise type applications.
So if there was a chance, look, because if some VCs listen to the show, that is something that if you got funding for that, you'd like to restart or reboot.
I think we'd have to possibly,
as a for-profit, though.
Yeah, for-profit. But I guess I would have to say that Minecraft has probably come along in the meantime and stepped in to fill. Really any not-for-profit or any charity should be aiming to put itself out of business. Yeah. In the sense that you're trying to solve a social problem.
True.
And maybe it's the case that Minecraft has kind of solved that problem now.
Yeah. I remember when Microsoft bought Minecraft, people were like, "That's crazy. That's crazy money." I remember going, "That's genius," because it's a piece of the pie of the ecosystem. It's like Apple with iTunes when they launched the iPod, because they're like, the iPod without having a music ecosystem isn't great. And they're like, well, we're going to build the ecosystem and we'll build every slice of the pie, and then you own that, your monopoly essentially. And podcasting, everything Apple thought of, it was just, I love that piece of Apple thinking. But Microsoft, and they're great second movers, I think, Microsoft, they sit back and they might be late and they might miss something, they might miss a cycle, but then they'll capitalize because I suppose they have enough capital to do so.
Yeah. I remember tweeting at the time, and I'm not saying I'm any kind of a futurist, but I said that, I see this when Microsoft bought Minecraft, I see this as their VR play.
Yeah.
And it did happen that they made a big deal of that with their HoloLens demos later on. But I think it was kind of an obvious fit for VR and AR. And you're right, and Microsoft has gotten a lot of stick over the years, but there's no doubt about it. They're really leading the pack, that the charge now with a true, really a mixed reality headset as opposed to an augmented reality headset. Yeah. Where it kind of crosses over between VR and AR, and the two of them are mixed in together.
Yeah, and regarding your futurist thing, you were, I mean, you were blogging before Twitter. And we talked about before, I think you should restart that bad boy, because and I know it takes a lot of time, but certainly your stuff back then, we were ahead of the game,
Yeah, I regret in a way. I suppose I started blogging around 2002 perhaps, and it was a small community back in the day, and I guess most Irish bloggers kind of knew each other, and there was almost a kind of a camaraderie, and most people left comments on other people's blogs. But yeah, there was a discipline involved in writing a blog post, like you know yourself, and it takes a long time, but it kind of forces you to be, I guess, rigorous. And that's not necessarily there with Twitter. And I got lazy about blogging once Twitter came along, which I shouldn't. I'd like to get going with it again, because a friend of mine actually had a great phrase a few years ago, and he said that blogging is a way of bringing yourself to the table.
Yeah.
And that, I think what he meant by that was that you can, you know, if you express yourself in a certain way, you can show a certain authority, and you don't have to kind of, you know, pretend you're any kind of an expert in something, but you can often bring yourself into discussions, really interesting discussions out of that.
I did. Well, I mean, my own thought on the blog I do is purely, it's a great way to learn. Like, I mean, you have to research the subject, and I mean that's probably where most of the time is.
Yeah,
is actually, you know, and then you have to go a little bit deeper than just, you know, here's my opinion, see you later, and you have to actually kind of research that and kind of think about it. And you know what I love about it actually is you cut out the crap, and you're just kind of go, no, I'm not gonna, that's crap, I'm just filling, I don't need to fill, because nobody has time anymore.
Yeah, it does. It certainly forces you to be more rigorous. Like you do. You often start out with a thought, an idea, and as you start writing it, you kind of realize, well, you know, maybe am I sure about that?
yeah.
And
it's like an MVP in a way, isn't it? It's like
exactly.
Straw man. No, it's not working.
Yeah, good analogy.
But because you know, you said about the blogging and the community, and you were early 2002, but you were also early with camps. I mean, 3D Camp is one of your meetups, and you were an early meetup guy.
Yeah, we were. I remember like the bar camp scene was interesting for a while, I guess around 2008 or 7. I'm not too sure when it started, but it was a thing that came out of, I guess, was it a European guy called Saul Klein, as far as I remember, was kind of pushing it in Europe. But it was a kind of a backlash, I guess, to a lot of expensive paid conferencing, you know, at the time, and there was this idea that we can get, you know, a bunch of geeks together for this, you know, free thing to enter, and people just come along on the day and they propose topics to speak about, and that was the basis of Bar Camp. I think when it was introduced to Ireland, they had to put a little bit more structure on it, because people weren't great at maybe volunteering to speak about things on the day. But certainly for a couple of years, like I think Cork was the first one, Bar Camp Cork, and then there was ones in Dublin and I guess Limerick, and then they started getting a bit more specialised. There was a Biz Camp in Limerick, and I think there was a Creative Camp in Kilkenny. And I remember then myself and a lecturer in UL called Gabriella Avram, great girl down there. She's lecturing in multimedia, and we were very interested in, I guess, the kind of looking beyond. Web 2.0 was the big thing. I remember that phrase. You couldn't escape it, like back there, and it was a bit. You know, Web 2.0 was all about web-based applications, and we were kind of more interested in looking beyond the flat, if you like, the flat web, and things like 3D printing, which was emerging, and augmented reality was very basic at the time, but it was there. And so, yeah, that was the basis. It was very specialized, I guess, and that was 2008. We had the first.
That's very early. Yeah,
it was quite early. We had the first 3D camp in 2008 in UL. And it ran as an annual conference for a good few years. And then I guess was it nearly 2 years ago, we decided, look, things are just happening too quick here to let it just be an annual conference. So we started kind of, if you like, meetup groups and chapters. So there was 3D Camp Limerick. There's a Dublin one now is really going strong.
Like, I mean, is that all voluntary? You don't get any sponsor on that or anything?
No, we like to keep that free, so it's free to attend, and people don't get paid to speak. So it's all voluntary, and that's a great way to have it. Yeah. And we're just very, very lucky to have Paul Power. Big thumbs up to Paul at Workday there, and Workday are great to support. And we've been very lucky. We've had the likes of Google and Dacry have supported us in the past. Workday have a fantastic office there in Smithfield, so it's a really great event.
And would you look for a sponsor on it?
No, I think we prefer to keep it
pure, man.
Yeah. Don't bring money into the equation if possible. Yeah.
Okay. And so I digressed away from Simvirtua. So where were we? 2011.
Yeah. Well, as I said, unfortunately, we had to wind that down eventually, and
this is pre-Simvirtua. So then Simvirtua was born.
Simvirtua was born out of that.
It's a phoenix from the ashes.
Out of the ashes, hopefully. Yeah. So and again, this kind of has coincided now then with the emergence of finally the VR headsets. You know, it's not like we knew for sure the VR headsets were going to come fairly soon in 2009, I guess, or 8, or whenever we started, but it was obvious at the same time that they were going to, the technology was going to rebound again after having disappeared for, let's say, 20 years from the time those movies were coming out. So yeah, we weren't about to give up on the idea. It was obvious to us that there was going to be a real blossoming of potential and opportunity in augmented and virtual reality. And thankfully, Oculus came out with the Oculus Rift, and then Facebook bought them, and suddenly everyone was like paying attention. And then the HTC Vive came along from Steam, and now Microsoft is doing the HoloLens. So it's starting to become a really interesting field, and we're talking to a lot of really interesting people in terms of enterprise and industrial applications.
Brilliant. And because I remember experiencing the Vive, and I was like, oh my god. I remember the application where you can paint. I'm just kind of going, this is amazing. Like there's a video on YouTube about the
tilt brush, is it?
Yeah,
yeah.
And he's an artist from Disney.
Yeah,
who
that's incredible.
Beauty and the Beast, and he's doing it in real life. And he's saying, this is changing the game, because that's how my mind does it anyway, except it's on a page. Yeah. And he's building them I just thought it was fascinating how he explained so well that when he writes on the page, he's thinking of them in life size, but now he can paint them in life size. That's
right. That's
a mind blower.
Incredible. That's Glenn Keane, I think, was the guy's name. He's like a legend of
animator. Yeah.
And Disney. Yeah, it was very interesting for me to hear, because you'd think somebody who's or drawing in 2D all his life that would be the way he'd do it. But no, as you say, it was the idea. He's always been thinking about these characters as 3-dimensional, and when you see it, there's such a kind of a physical choreography to drawing. It's almost like he's sculpting with a pen. It's like a totally new capability that we have now to draw in 3D, and just give that alone to kids in an educational context and let them at it, and you can imagine the incredible stuff that they could produce.
Because I with my boy, the two lads, my sons, I've given them like the odd. Josh is into like rollercoasters; he's a speed freak, and you can give him the 360 view in the YouTube stuff, and he's like, "This is awesome, Dad." And you can give him, you can bring it to him, but the difference there is it's not interactive. Like, he could build that, and in the future he can build his own roller coaster, design it the way he wants, design the experience. And like, if you bring Minecraft and that together, you're just going to go, the future for that world is fantastic. Which leads me to this question: the clients, because there's kind of a lot of hype around VR and AR at the moment, but I don't see a lot of action. And I don't see, it's kind of like the early days of web, where, you're lucky to get an enterprise client earlier who may give you enough runway to keep the company going. And, there's a lot of talk, but not a lot of action around stuff. And, I know Vulture Ireland did some great work with the Wild Atlantic Way, and Sherry Fitz with bringing new builds to you in a virtual. I think that's great uses of it, and it'd be great to see more companies getting on board early. And I'm sure from your perspective, you'd want to get a little kick up the backside for some companies, just to get things going and get in touch.
Oh, of course, yeah, and it has been kind of slow. I think, unfortunately, we're to a degree, we are laggards in this country again, because you're seeing a lot of people jumping on board now in the States and the UK and so on. But it is starting to happen. People are starting to get it. So, like, we did a workshop there for architects a few months ago in Dublin. There was a lot of interest. So, I mean, architects, there's no reason. We were showing them how to create their own virtual reality. And it's not that difficult for someone to use the likes of Unity game engine to bring in models. Like, all the architects are using.
They're doing it anyway, aren't
SketchUp.
they?
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're creating their own stuff in SketchUp, and it's not that difficult to go the next step, put it into Unity game engine, and produce a version of it on a phone that you can then see through a cardboard headset. And like, I think they were really, initially they were really surprised that it could be that accessible.
So sorry to interrupt. I just while we're on it, where do you see? So for people listening here to pick up the phone, pick up the email, pick up the mouse, and get in touch. What kind of industry? I know it's like a very broad question, like how many industries can get in touch. But right now, like, what kind of stuff are you kind of going, this is staring in the face of X industry or Y industry?
Yeah, I think the kind of the more obvious, I'll call them, industries are the ones where people are already doing stuff in 3D. So this is like construction, architecture, they're engineering, all these CAD programs that are creating stuff in 3 dimensionals, in 3D, but on flat screens. It makes no sense.
I know, it's nuts.
And finally, we're there where we can actually create that stuff in proper 3D in virtual reality. So they're going to jump on. They are jumping on
3D printing as well. Anything in 3D printing.
Exactly. Anything is going to be output in 3D. Yeah, 3D print as well. So that's kind of the more obvious ones, and they'll be first. They'll jump on board very, very quickly. They are doing so. I think maybe the less obvious ones, and there's a lot of interesting stuff in the wake of that. Then is the likes of health and safety. So we've been talking to large utilities about doing health and safety training, and they've situations there where guys in the field. Ideally they should be training guys to do something in the field, but it can be like too dangerous, too expensive, or just too disruptive to actually train people in reality. And then the other alternative is traditionally just to do that in the classroom scenario, where they're looking at a video or writing something down on a whiteboard. And you can imagine that's just not a proper alternative, because there's a real choreography, a kind of a physical choreography involved in terms of people understanding how to move if an emergency situation happens, and what their colleagues and people around them are doing. So obviously, it's very obvious then when you kind of explain it in those terms that the next best alternative obviously is to do that in virtual reality. And so we're starting to see some real, I think, excitement in that sense. It's getting a whole lot easier to model things in 3D too, and you've seen there's almost like convergence to a degree of drone technology now with VR, in the sense of sending drones up to capture what's called photogrammetry, which is catching a lot of photographs of something, a structure, let's say, while you're flying around that structure. And then the software can put all those photographs together and create the 3D model of the building. So that's been used in the likes of construction as well as cultural heritage and things like that. And like it's getting, there's so many of these industries are converging now, these technologies. Another good example there, I guess, is there's an Irish company called Movidius, which is doing really pioneering work with a chip that's a major part of the Google Tango project, which is just starting to be called Tango now, because it's in one of the new phablets. I don't know if it's the Lenovo or the LG. One of the new phones has eventually going to have this chip in it, which will allow you to use your phone to capture depth information. Do you remember like the Kinect camera?
Yeah.
So it's going to be like a Kinect camera to a degree in your phone, which will allow you to walk into, let's say, into a room, and you're capturing a 3D model of that room as you're walking around. So you can imagine then, like that.
Game changer.
Yeah, it is a game changer. You're going to have 3D models of everywhere you go, literally. And why not then, see those in virtual reality?
Is that what Movidius is doing? Yeah.
Movidius, and they're a real pioneer. I think they're kind of not recognized enough for the pioneering work they're doing there.
They're from the Dublin BIC, aren't they? Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. So, what's next then for Simvirtua?
Well, it's like one of the challenges really is kind of to focus, and what we really want to do, I guess, is talk with more domain experts. People in construction and in retail, people who see real potential in virtual reality, and we'd like to, I guess, partner with those and eventually productize then. So we're not in a rush, I guess, at the moment, Aidan, to productize. We want to be sure that we're going to build something, that has some real potential.
Has a market.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we'll talk to anybody who's an idea for AR or VR. Please come and have a chat.
Okay, and where can they reach you, Jay?
They can reach us on Twitter at Simvirtua. So it's SIMVIRTUA, and it's simvirtua.com, or James at simvirtua.com.
And then 3D Camp.
And that's at 3dcamp.eu or at 3dcamp on Twitter as well.
Okay, well, James Corbett, CEO and founder of Simvirtua and 3D Camp, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Aidan.
So now in the Innovation Show, we welcome Garry Connolly, president of HostinIreland.com. Welcome to the show.
Thanks very much.
So let's talk about Hosting Ireland. Let's jump straight into it. I know you've an interesting backstory, but you've in your humility, you've wanted to focus on Hosting Ireland and the ethos behind it. So let's jump straight into that.
Yeah, sure. One of the things that I've seen demonstrated over the last 30 to 35 years in industry is been the success of co-opetition and collaboration. It's changed in name. It's had different monikers. But fundamentally, when you look at bringing the best of any ecosystem together and branding them or presenting them in a singular point of reference. And I've always wanted to try and develop that we could go out to the market with that brand. And I'm a technologist at heart, and I've looked at competing different technologies, going back to even VHS and Betamax. When did that actually expand, and when did the market for home consumer video really take off? Was when the consumers didn't have to choose between Betamax and VHS.
Yeah, it's true.
So that whole competition side of things, they just wanted to say, well, which one will I buy? Because people were in fear. So therefore what happened? People didn't buy. They rented.
Yeah, because they didn't want to get it wrong.
They didn't want to get it wrong. Then you had, even in the early days of computing and technology, you had IBM, Digital, Nixdorf, Novell, Microsoft, all using proprietary protocols. So what did people do? They procrastinated. What if I choose the wrong one? What if I invest this bit? So what came along? IP. And once IP came along as the de facto standard, the internet exploded, all technologies, and therefore we were able to connect the world together. So it worked on both ways, right? It worked on the side of the consumer, which were the businesses. The guy didn't have to answer the question, what if this technology loses? And the second thing is that the manufacturers of the OEMs were able to make equipment that they knew was interoperable with others. So when you had that interconnected world, then you had more confidence on the consumer side, confidence on the supply chain. So I really wanted to see, could we do that with what was perceived globally as a successful marketplace, i.e. Ireland, for the hosting of digital assets, and see, could we bring together the leading companies in that ecosystem, who were great in the hosting side, were great, say, in the connectivity side, but they're all silos of greatness. And in the words of many technologists in the past, so what? You know, you don't buy a motor car because it has a great spark plug. You don't buy a motor car because it's got a great sump. 99% of people buy a motor car because it's finished, and you then can tweak it. The colour can be tweaked, but you want it all presented. And you want as well, in many respects, the car to be represented the same by the different dealerships. Because if one dealer tells you that it does 25 miles a gallon and the other guy says it does 35 miles a gallon, you might go to another car. Yeah. You're not being told the same. So we set out 2 years ago now, just over 2 years, to see, could we bring together all those parts? And the obvious thing then is that these are big companies. The companies that are part of the co-opetition are big competing companies globally. And that's why you must engage at the C-level. Because, you know, these guys at C-level are being paid, you hope, to be strategic and tactical.
Yeah.
Yeah. So therefore, they shouldn't be, and in our case, they weren't driven by fear of failure. So by bringing a whole group of them together who were competitors and saying, you know what, guys, if you come together, brand yourselves as a entity that understands the issues, then the clients are more likely to engage. So we launched Host in Ireland initially with 6 partners, and we made it simple. I think I said earlier, I've never had a unique idea probably in my whole life, but looking back, you know, if you want to know what the road looks like going forward, probably ask somebody else coming back the other way. Yeah. He may not be on the same bicycle you're on. He may not be wearing the same shoes you are, but there's always somewhere has tried something that you're thinking about. And why not learn from his experiences? So I looked actually at Tony O'Reilly's time when he was working with the Irish dairy industry. And Ireland, as you know, always had great soil and grass and milk. We always had great butter. But it wasn't until he packaged it all up and said Kerry Gold, put a gold bar and it said the greatest butter in the world or something to that effect, that people actually started to say, oh, Ireland has the greatest butter. So he packaged, it was about the package. And that's what Host in Ireland has done. It's taken all the great things that we call our hosting ecosystem, which is, by the way, just an evolution of how the world consumes and accesses data. You know, and that's why I often say to people about Ireland's growth in hosting and data centers. It's absolutely just an evolution. Because if you think back to 60 years ago, when Ireland was the leading software company for IBM, Digital, Nixdorf, we were the biggest in the outside North America for the export of those pieces of hardware. Then Microsoft, Oracle, these people, we exported floppy disks. Now that's just evolved to be cloud. So all we've done is we've actually changed the mediums that we deliver. But we've always been the largest supplier in Europe of software, which is the cloud, which is Microsoft in the 80s, which then went on from a floppy disk to a CD-ROM that went on to a fob, and then we're on cloud, so nobody has CDs. So bringing that together, topping and tailing it, and then most importantly, which I think is what Hosting Ireland stands for, is getting those self-same people who compete with each other in Ireland to go out internationally and stand shoulder to shoulder wearing Hosting Ireland shirt. So for instance, we're just back from New Orleans, we're just back from Austin, we just picked up an innovation award in Monaco, where 6 of our partners, who are, again, I say the US's largest, stood shoulder to shoulder to accept the award. That's where you build confidence. That's where people say, oh, these guys seem to be at least talking to each other. They don't have to like each other.
So it's a collaboration's at the heart of it.
Oh, absolutely. Co-opetition is at the heart of a cooperation between competitors. And that's the essence, is that we start conversations that the partners end. That's the whole idea. And you know, like the motor car, we all can't, own a McLaren. But I think McLaren is owned by Mercedes or the other way around. But people say, oh, I love McLaren. That's like the showcase. The closest that we can afford is probably the BMW or the Mercedes or whoever owns them. So it very much is a co-opetition. And not only that, now it started with 4. We've now grown it to 17. The 17 now aren't just Irish companies that are here in Ireland or American companies calling Ireland home. They're American companies that want to join in to promote Ireland because they believe in the power of what we call the 5 Ps. And the 5 Ps is what Hosting Ireland is all about. And it goes back to our policies, our pedigree, our people, our power and our pipes. Throw them all together. Wrap around then that all those things are the issues that business care about now. Policies on data privacy, data protection, sovereignty. C-levels care about that stuff, because that's brand protection. Right down the different layers to power and pipes. If you don't have power, you don't have pipes to distribute the content, you don't have anything. So it's to bring that together, wrap it around then strong brands that people are... Success for us is when people come to us and say, I can't believe those two are working together.
Yeah.
Yes, home run.
Yeah, brilliant.
That's the home run, because that's what they don't do in other places. But they have data centers, they have communications infrastructure, they have tax incentives, they have all the things. But when you bring them together, that's one thing. But when you actually get them, the people who make money from it, to come together as well, then people go, that reduces what's most important in the world, risk.
Yeah.
Because most people live by risk.
It's interesting, Gary, because you kind of take a step back and you kind of go look at even companies. So companies who, like we talked about Sony beforehand, like Sony, deeply siloed company back, and when they really got hit in the early noughties, their stock got absolutely plummeted. But they discovered they had these massive silos in the company, and nobody was collaborating across the company. And just to draw an analogy with that, what you've kind of come in is as a neutral partner that doesn't have an agenda, essentially, because if one silo was to approach another and go, look, let's work together, the immediate thing, because you mentioned the fear factor in the amygdala, the lizard brain going, oh, what's he after? What's trying to steal my lunch here? Yeah. And you're kind of doing that at an industry level and kind of going, guys, we need to work together, because if we don't, we're going to struggle to challenge the world, because we're up against the rest of the world here.
We're going to recruit you for our marketing department, because that's just it in a nutshell. The other thing to be most important is I don't work in the industry. I work on the industry. All the guys and all our partners work in it day in, day out. They have all the nuts and bolts. If you try and think of putting a person from in the industry to the top of any association, guess what? At some stage, some people is going to turn around and say, why am I telling him all this? What's in it for his organization? Therefore, I don't work for any of the 17 partners. I work on the industry. These guys have forgotten more about what they do than I'll ever know. That's not our job.
Yeah.
Our job is to take the key ingredient parts, join them together and make it easier for the consumer, which in this case is business, to understand why would I even look at that place? Because we often get, and that's what the beauty of travel is. You know, travel opens your eyes to see whether what we call a problem is just the global norm. And then it's not a problem anymore. It's just a global challenge. And that's when I hear a lot of discussions around Ireland has too much hosting. It's taking us over all our natural resources and energy and stuff. It's as if it's being presented as if it's only here. This is a global challenge. Like your listeners today, if you don't want data to continue to be the oxygen of your life, turn off your phone, turn off your internet radio, which many of your people will be listening to now. Everything is going to stop if you don't want to buy into the digital world that we're in. Software is eating the physical. But, you know, go back to the printing press, 1956, which is a fantastic statement from one of the religious order at the time. He said, the only thing good that can come out, the only thing that'll come out of printing presses is it'll make monks lazy. Right? So that's 500, 600 years ago. Yeah. You'll always have the establishment detracting from when you want to do something differently. And, you know, a lot of our partners, they're not the biggest in some cases. There are bigger companies in Ireland that should and would benefit from it. But again, it comes down to fear. You know, it comes down to that fear. Oh, what if it goes wrong? Yeah. Whereas, unfortunately or fortunately for people like me, I actually say, how many times better would it be if it goes right? Because you're going to fail. Yeah. Right? I've failed many, many times. I'm just lucky that the ones I failed were smaller than the ones that succeeded. Yeah. In lots of aspects, you know, and that's the key. You got to go into collaboration and co-opetition with a mindset of, we're going to make this work. Because I have a field, you know, cooperation in farming in Ireland, you know, until such time as the guy said, let's establish co-ops and have one combine harvester that we able to compete with the other county. So we've exemplars here. And what's most unique about a co-opetition like Host in Ireland is you see collaboration. It's usually in research and development. It's usually at the technological level. We're at the front line. It's the PR, sales and marketing of the actual whole ecosystem. Yeah. And that's where the ego comes out a lot with a lot of, and they're all happy enough. And I showed you maybe pictures earlier of the guys down in Monaco. You know, they're happy enough just to, well, Monaco's not the worst place to go anyway, but, but what it represented was that these guys are prepared to be proud of their investment in this ecosystem and stand shoulder by shoulder to win an award together.
Yeah. So to go back to your car analogy, in a way, you know, you have one company that's exemplars in the doors, another in spark plugs, another in windscreens, etc., etc. But you're the one putting the brochure together essentially and kind of going to the other countries and kind of going, look, this is what you can get in Ireland, and then delivering on that promise as well.
Yeah, but that's the key, is to as I said, start the discussion. Yeah, because sometimes when you're in Ireland, you think everybody thinks the same as we do, and everybody knows about us. But actually, what filters up to the top can often be very different. You know, you tell me something and I'll tell 5 people, and by the time it comes back around to you, it's probably different. Yeah, and we're also competing in a highly competitive global world where, you know, ignorance is an option. Yeah, ignorance now is an option. Since Google search or whatever, you know, if you want to know anything about anything within reason, you can Google it. Yeah. So you choose to be ignorant on a geographic location. What's wonderful now, what we're finding is that when people Google about this particular subject matter, we have leading companies using the same basic principles of the 5 Ps to promote their part of it. And it gives confidence to the consumer then to say, okay, well, it seems to be very consistent. You know, It seems to be very consistent. They seem to be talking to each other, because data is the new oxygen of the world, or whatever you want to call it, the new oil and stuff. The decision to put it somewhere isn't just based on one facet. it has to all blend together.
Yeah.
And that's why ultimately, if all the bits look great on paper, then you want to see, like you when you were playing rugby, I'm sure you saw loads of great emerging young players that on statistics look great, but they'd no match sense.
Yeah.
No game
Or
sense.
hard work.
They wouldn't apply themselves,
Yeah,
right? So statistically, everything works on the spreadsheet. But you got to then see, well, who's in that ecosystem? How well are they working together? Because a lot of the partners that we have in and those that aren't, it doesn't matter how great where your data rests. How do you get it in and get it out? That's another partner. How do you get it in and get it out of the country? That's another partner. What happens in the event that there's data privacy issues? Who do you talk to? So we're bringing it all under one. Somebody can navigate the system and understand it, and then ultimately say, let's look deeper into it.
It's so true, because you do need that objective observer to be kind of, because like you say, everybody's working in the business, and very few have time to. And now I think it's wrong. I've said it on the show before that you need a team within your company to be working on the business all the time, and it's very, very rare that happens. And for innovation to happen in any company, you need a team that's removed from the business as per business as usual today.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not going to innovate, because they have to exist by a different set of rules to future-proof the company. But in a way, you're that outsourced partner that's doing that and kind of going, I suppose, less than outsourced, because you're a partner, but you've got everybody's interest in hand. And you're not, there's nobody getting any favors, no favoritism. So therefore, as you said about the fear factor, it's lesser, because you're dealing with C level execs. They're kind of going, you know what, Garry and the Host in Ireland team have this. They got it.
Yeah, and they can tap into it and use it as a term of reference.
Yeah,
as well. And you're so right with regard to the whole working together idea. To say that all the partners outside of the time we have the executive council meetings or the advisory council meetings go out and hug and kiss each other down the street, no way. They go back to being same way as, again, I'll go back to your rugby days when you represented whoever your team and you then went to play for Leinster. You were a team when you were in Leinster, but then you went back on a Saturday, and that's the way you want it. Because otherwise you could have a suggestion that everybody's in cahoots with each other. It's not the case. But it is very important that everybody understands the rules of the game. And it's more important that the supporters understand the consistency of the rules of the game, And that's why bringing a group like this, and we were very lucky. I was very lucky that at the time, 2 years ago, when I brought the idea to the initial 5 C-levels, they got it.
Brilliant.
They got it.
Yeah.
And it's amazing when 5 guys get it, then you seem to, well, if they're in, I'm not sure why.
Yeah, you feel a bit uncomfortable.
I want to be
FOMO.
I want to be in.
Yeah.
But we've just been lucky that and we're up to 17 now, and we're lucky enough that some are coming to us and saying, look,
brilliant.
We're from X geographic location. We're investing in Ireland. We'd like to be part of this.
It's so interesting you say about the, you want them to be competitors, but you want them to cooperate on certain levels. And one of the best analogies I heard was, I wrote a blog post on it, is the watering hole, the phenomenon of the watering hole in nature, where all the animals come together and the tiger and the gazelle will drink peacefully at the watering hole. And then they go back into the jungle and kill each other.
Eat each other.
So literally, And it goes a bit further than eating somebody else's lunch. But
but that's what you want too, because that brings a real dynamic to the group as well.
Yeah. And so Garry, where can companies get in touch, and what type of company should get in touch?
It all goes through the website.
Yeah.
It all goes through the hostinireland.com website. And there you'll be able to connect with all the micro details on the 5 Ps, examples of who are here, who's doing what, why they're doing what, more importantly, and also then the individual members of the ecosystem. But interestingly enough, and a bit like you either are in the interest in the why for Ireland as distinct to individual agendas at the individual members level, it's nearly all about Host in Ireland. So members of the ecosystem that aren't members of Host in Ireland benefit exactly the same as those that are actually members and writing the check. And that's what you want to do as well. Yeah. And ultimately, you asked me before why I did what I'm doing. It's really quite easy. I think that I have 2 young kids. I'd love them to have an option when they're coming out the other side of university, that do I stay or do I go?
Yeah.
That's all you want to do. Do I stay or do I go?
Yeah.
And up to this generation, a lot haven't had that option. So everything I do every day is give them the option. Do I stay or do I go? But not having to go. The selfish reason is I can't bear them. Mother's tears.
It's a real leadership thing. I mean, leadership is essentially enablement and facilitation and creating the environment for success to happen. I'm delighted I met you, Garry, because I didn't know enough about Hosting Ireland. I'd seen bits and pieces on social media, and people can get in touch at Hosting Ireland on Twitter.
Yeah.
But I'm delighted to get a deep understanding of it, and it's fantastic work you're doing. We wish you the very best of luck.
To your listeners, there's cheaper tax somewhere else. There's cheaper energy somewhere else. There's more connectivity somewhere else. There's more people somewhere else. When you blend it all together and then present it, people want to know why, why, how did they do it?
Yeah,
you know? And after you get over the fact that we get you all drunk and we get compromising pictures of you.
That's the secret sauce.
That's the secret sauce. Oh, sorry, am I live?
Well, Garry Connolly, President of Hosting Ireland and hostingireland.com, thank you for coming in to us.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you.